Hi, parents, players, and coaches of the Monroe Woodbury United Soccer Club. My name is Brendan Lawler. I am the Director of Coaching and Player Development in the club. We are very excited to be able to put together this presentation for all of you so that we can really kind of all be on the same page with expectations of each other, what we should be requiring of all of the stakeholders in the club. My role, like as I said before, is the Director of Player and Coaching Development. That has a lot of different parts to it. I'm certainly far from the only person who is working in the club to help out all of our stakeholders, but I wanted to make this presentation so that going forward, whether you're a new parent or an old parent, we always have something to refer to kind of know what we're getting into and holding each other accountable. Just so you know, my personal background for the last 11 years, I've been the head coach of women's soccer at Manhattan College. Before that, I was a 4-year assistant coach at West Point Army with the men's soccer team. I coached high school in Pine Bush. I was also a social studies teacher in Pine Bush. My education is a BA in political science with a focus on secondary education, and I have a master's in organizational leadership. We're going to be coming at this presentation mostly at a long-term player development model with the understanding of how we can all help our players develop in the long term, with that always being our key focus. So just see in front of you is basically just an agenda that we'll be looking through for this presentation, so you have an idea of what we're about to get into. Before we go further, though, and start with the history and the success of the club, we're dealing with obviously with young kids, ages anywhere from 6 up to 18. So education is our focus, and so one of the things that, from my standpoint, that I think is important to know is that we're very much education driven. I have been through all of our coaching education courses from multiple different bodies in the United States. I'm also on a educational staff for both U.S. Soccer and what's called United Soccer Coaches. So one of the big focuses that both organizations are making is to have better communication with our parents. And so again, that's the kind of drive behind this, is to have us all moving in the same direction, not these separate pieces who aren't all on the same page going forward. So just so you have an idea of where we've been and where we would like to go, right? There used to be 2 clubs in the Monroe Woodbury School District. Those clubs came together in 2013, and then with the creation of what's the more elite program within the club, which is trying to compete in college showcases and help our players get into the colleges of their choices to play soccer, which we call the Force program, we've really tried to expand our footprint beyond just the school district. However, that being said, the school district is our home community. Orange County is obviously our home community, and we're really trying to strive to give all players and families access to a high-level club in the area without having to travel all over the place. So in the great success of the people who still run the club, our volunteer board members brought these programs together, and since then we've been to some of the best tournaments in the country, literally across the country. Last year 2 of our teams competed in national championships out in Colorado. We have been to tournaments up and down the East Coast with some of the hundreds and hundreds of college coaches watching our players play. We play in our Force programs play in the National League, which is literally what it sounds like, with divisions across the country. We have won state cups, won one last year, won one in the past. The players on our teams have been a huge factor in the success of our high school soccer team. Obviously, we have great coaches within the Monroe Woodbury School District who have really been able to just excel on the field and win section championship after section championship and state championships over the past few years. But again, most of the players on those teams have continued through our club, and at the very least have started within our club. And we have players, that have graduated from our force programs who are playing at all levels of college, and some have been able to help get their education paid for and have had great success there, becoming captains of their teams and making all conference teams and things like that. So the club has really come a long way in the past 7 years from two smaller split, what would you describe as regular rec and travel clubs, to still offering that to everybody that wants it, but offering that higher level that's a little bit more accessible in terms of cost and distance of driving. So I think it's important for all of us to kind of understand the organizational structure of the club. The board is completely made up of volunteers. Our success is built on the back of those volunteers who, as we just said, brought two clubs together and have literally fought very hard to gain acceptance into higher level leagues for our clubs. It's a difficult thing for a club to build up to one of our nature, which tries to offer all levels to everybody, and they've done a fantastic job of being able to do that. And again, based on all of their free time outside of their work and trying to raise their children and be outstanding family members, they're also outstanding community members who have built a fantastic organization. They're soccer people. What we mean by that is most of them have played soccer, have coached for a long time, have continued their coaching education, participate in all kinds of formal and informal learning opportunities. And again, they're not paid members of the club. They're doing it for the love of their community and to help the children that are around them. In the past, this structure has led to the club being about individual teams kind of having a good amount of freedom to be what they wanted to be, instead of a club focused model, which would be a more centered model telling them how to train and what level they'd play at and things like that. And what we ended up with was some teams being extremely successful and some teams not. Teams kind of breaking apart after a few years if they didn't happen to have a coach or volunteer who was extremely dedicated. Now, a lot of those coaches and volunteers also coached many teams, so 2, 3, 4 teams that they were out there with. But as we've started to kind of, if they've kind of pulled back a little bit from that, we've had to move on to other coaches and volunteers who, through no fault of their own, just couldn't give the same kind of time and energy that certain other members of the club could. And you had this kind of dichotomy of teams who were really succeeded and ones that weren't. So that's obviously not a successful model going long term, to rely on the good Samaritans in the community to go above and beyond all the time. So changing that to a more club focused model is something that we'll talk about shortly. We talked about that there. There's always kind of club rules, but coaches were expected to kind of, run everything themselves, find new players, run their tryouts, go to whatever tournaments they wanted to, play into whatever leagues they wanted to. And that's, again, something we're going to try and move away from a little bit, because finding those volunteers who can go above and beyond for years and years and years is a very difficult thing to do. So we've started to move a little bit more towards a club-centered model with paid coaches at certain age groups and a director of coaching. What this does is help us to kind of make it easier to mentor coaches, make it easier to make sure that coaches are using the most up-to-date methodologies, that they're planning their training sessions, that we're doing everything we can to help build all of our teams and keep all of our teams running for the long term, and because we can't have a kind of haphazard approach of two teams being very good and two teams not. And in the world of youth soccer, things are becoming much more club driven, where 5, 10, 15 years ago, if an individual team was out there by itself, making things work, that they could get into all the tournaments and all the leagues they needed to. But things are much more club driven now, and we need a more centered model to make sure that we're all doing taking the right steps for all of our teams to be successful going forward. So we've just talked about a lot with this on the slide from the last slide, but again, a club-focused model where coaches are using the same curriculum, which we've had in the club for many years now, but not something that's necessarily been enforced. It's been reinforced through the sending out of what training sessions should look like and what we expect of coaches. But it's still kind of been on coaches to kind of implement that on their own. So we are taking many more strides from a methodology standpoint, from a training session standpoint, to the leagues we expect teams to play in, to the tournaments we expect teams to play in, how often they should train. We're moving towards things like training similar age groups at the same time on the same field, so that they can train against each other and have more productive training sessions that way. Just a lot of ideas that we're looking to put forward, so that older players get to play against younger players, and the younger players get to see what it's like to play against older, better players, challenge themselves that way. Older players get a chance to kind of lead the younger players. So we've got a lot of ideas on how we'd like to do that, and over the next the rest of this year going into the 2021 season, 2022 season. Those are things that we're looking to put in place. We talked about across curriculum and methodology, making sure that one team is not being coached on a methodology that would have been used 30, 40 years ago, and one is using one more up to date. We talked about combining teams, having them see different coaches to get a different point of view and adapt and have to be able to kind of understand the principles of play in a lot of different similar situations. Something I think that's really important to understand is introducing more skill-based training. You'll hear the word skill from us come up a few more times, and hopefully in future presentations. We want to define the word skill as being able to execute a decision under time and space restraints. Think about being able to shoot a soccer ball on goal. If you are out there by yourself at the top of the penalty area and you can lock your ankle and shoot it on goal all of the time, that's good, but it doesn't mean that you're going to become a goal scorer. Goal scorers have to find space. They have to move at the right time. They have to receive the ball in the way that allows them to get a shot off. They have to see the goalkeeper, and they have to be able to then execute that decision of where and how to shoot the ball. So just shooting the ball over and over again without pressure and time constraints doesn't necessarily help you become a better soccer player, even though it might help you being able to strike a ball when you're out there by yourself. And that's what we mean by technical repetition. This isn't necessarily the presentation to keep diving any deeper than that, but just understanding the mindset of us coaches as we're out there with the players, not putting them in lines and doing drills to do technical repetition over and over and over again, but putting them in game-based situations in order to help build skills, which again we're going to define as being able to execute a decision under time and pressure constraints. All right, so now we're going to move more into the expectations of everybody. So first stakeholder we're going to look at is the club and coaches. Player-centric, meaning that this is about the players. It's not about the coaches, it's not about the parents, it's not about the club. It's about players being out there in that skill-based environment and trying to develop them over the long term. We will have another future presentation about what long-term development means, and understanding that it means different things for different players. We all don't develop in a linear straight line at the same rate all of the time, and we've got to recognize where our players are along that development curve and help them to move forward. So fun, safe, educational environment. Again, educational, fun, and safe all being part of that, not three separate things. Not one day it's fun and one day it's safe and the next day it's educational, but fun, safe, and educational in a holistic way in every training session that we put together and every game that we come out to play in. We've talked about this a lot now, but how we train, what we say at training, why we're training the things that we are, how we play in games, the formation that we take, what we expect from the players, all of that we want to now centralize in this club model to again help players develop long term, not win games in the short term. So for instance, the player formation systems and styles is not meant to make sure you're winning a lot of trophies at U9. It's meant to make sure that players are becoming the best possible players that they can be, and by the time they're 13, 14, 15 through high school, that they're still playing soccer, and that that when they hit puberty and as they really start to develop physically, it's not as everybody catches up to their speed or their strength, they still have the skills to be able to play, and developing those skills in case they're late bloomers physically whenever that starts to happen. So again, always considering these things in the long-term development model. So again, a big part of my job in this is to make sure that our coaches are learning and understand and are implementing changes to best practices. Again, so we're not playing in a way that the game might have been played 40 years ago. The game is always changing, and we're not doing our players any favor if we're still using methods and systems and formations that nobody has been using for the past 20 years. All right, so understanding that how we manage playing time for U8, 9, and 10 at 7v7 will be different than how we do it for U11s and 12s at 9v9. And then as we go to full-sided, as they go into high school, and as they start trying to play in college showcases and higher level tournaments, management of game time will be different. But in order for players to develop long term, they have to play in games. So the expectations of the club and coaches is that kids are playing at the younger ages, that we're not sitting kids who might not be as good because they might get in the way of a win in that short term. Now, obviously, there's not one set way of going about doing that. You might be playing in a tournament final versus a scrimmage. Obviously, though, how we manage playing time in those games might be very, very different, and they should be very, very different. But that should be an expectation of a coach, that he is going to, or she is going to play players in games so that they develop. Right, and this can be a difficult thing to get everybody on the same page with, but one of the struggles that every club has is a roster size. As players move from 7v7 to 9v9 to 11v11, in order to get players playing, it's easier for a 7v7 team to only have 10 players on the team in order to move them in and out and get them a lot of playing time, and that's great until they move to 9v9, and now there's only 10 players, and one player gets hurt, and one player has CCD or has a birthday, and they can't come, and they don't have enough players now. So one of the things the club is doing is trying to take more players at younger ages. This can cause some issues with playing time on both sides of the roster, but we do believe they are manageable, and we're working with coaches to help manage that. But again, long-term development as a guide, the teams fall apart if we don't have enough players for them. So a 7v7 team with 8 players isn't going to be a 9v9 team, and they're not going to be developing for very long if they don't exist anymore. So just understanding that we're not in this for the short term, we're in it for the long term, and larger rosters at younger ages, though sometimes difficult to manage, will help us continue to have teams as we get older. And keeping more players playing in the game is good for everybody in every way. And then lastly, we want to hold players accountable for the expectations of the players, which is our next slide. But we're going to lay out rules and expectations for players, and it's up to the coach and the club to not just have them be words on the page, but to have them be actively important to how we're trying to develop players off the field and on. All right, so players, this is for you. What we expect from our players, this is really every age. Doesn't matter whether you're 6 years old or you're 18 years old. These are the same expectations. Obviously, each team is going to have slightly different ones based on the age and the purpose of the team, but these are applicable to everybody. So bring energy and excitement to every practice, right? Wanting to be there. Wanting to, as soon as you put your cleats on, be on the ball and be out there with your friends and running around and trying to improve, right? Without energy and excitement about something, it's hard to learn about it. It have to begrudgingly get through something. You're not going to have the same experience as when you're excited about it. So we need players to, be in charge of themselves, which starts with organizing their own bags, making sure they have cleats and shin guards and water and a ball, making sure that, if it's a little bit cold out, they're dressed appropriately. If it's warm out, that they're dressed appropriately. And this should not be, doesn't have to be, at least, mom and dad doing everything for them, especially as they start to get older and they have some experience, on a team. But again, if you're excited and you want to be at practice, then part of that is making sure that you have all the things you need to have a quality practice. All right, so full mental and physical effort. So you're out there, you're not, just hanging out in the back with your friend. You're not just running around doing whatever you want, that you're listening to your coaches, that you're listening to your teammates, and you're trying to not only do what they say, but understand what's being said. So asking questions, coaches love when players ask questions. It means that they are listening to learn, that they're not just listening to, is it their time to speak yet? They're not just listening so that they can nod their head if a coach asks them a question, but that they're taking the information and they want to improve, and then they're asking questions if they don't quite understand. So that's a big expectation of players. And so going back to coaches, right, it's going to be an expectation of coaches to encourage questions and answer them in the most educational way as possible. All right. So being good teammates is a lot of what we said above. All of what we said above is part of being a good teammate. But so is encouraging your teammates, telling them they did a great job when they did a great job, speaking to them respectfully. If someone gets knocked down, help them get back up, especially if you did it yourself. I think part of our long-term development model is not just about making them better soccer players, but hopefully making them better people as well. All right, this is a simple one. Obviously this depends on the age of a player, whether or not they have a phone, but parents obviously can help with this. So obviously being on time, coaches understand that a 7-year-old might not be, in charge of getting themselves to a practice on time, but it is their job to make sure they're ready to go when their parents are ready to go. And if they're not, just send a simple courteous text to a coach saying, I'm going to be a few minutes late. And this is a big one, that if you're excited and you're energetic about being on a soccer team, that you're not only playing soccer at practice, that you're not only thinking about soccer at practice. If you're only practicing 2 days a week for an hour and a half each time, there are lots of other hours in the day that you can be outside running around with a ball with your friends, playing 1v1 in the back, working on moves, working on shooting, working on juggling. If you're lucky enough to have a wall near you or in a basement where your parents are going to let you play, doesn't mean you have to do this all of the time. Obviously, we encourage you to have other hobbies, especially if there are other sports. I shouldn't say especially, if there are other sports, that's great too, because you're still outside being athletic and staying fit. But anything, music, art related, and sometimes we just need a break from sports to do other things. But if this is something that you're very interested in and that you enjoy it, that you're not only doing it at the time where the coach says you have to do it. All right, moving on to the expectations of parents now. We want players to love the game. We want players to play on their own. As we said before, we want them excited and energetic about the game. And one of the biggest things that can help with that is parents reinforcing that love. So what are the ways that we can reinforce the love? Ask them. Right? Ask our players, did you have fun today? Tell them that you love watching them play. On game day, that we're celebrating hard work, we're celebrating effort, we're celebrating teamwork. And then there's the opposite of those things, or I should say we're not doing the opposite of those things. We're not critiquing everything that they do all of the time. We're not telling them everything to do all of the time. The thing about soccer specifically, and I'm sure other sports are like this as well, but soccer is a decision-making game. There are lots of decisions that could be made based on the ability level of the player, where they are on the field, where their teammates are on the field, and what their coaches expect from them. Right? So take a player who is, has the ball at their feet 25 yards from goal or 20 yards from goal, and they, can make a lot of different decisions. They can try and have a passing combination with teammates. They can try and dribble the defender. They can try and shoot. They can do lots of different things, and they have to be free to make those decisions, understanding that all of them might lead to a turnover. They might lead to a shot that goes wide and gives the ball back to the opponent. They might all be a low probability of success, and that's okay. They have to understand that. And so the hardest thing for a player to do is to make a decision in an environment where coaches and teammates and parents are all from literally every different direction telling them what to do. It's information overload. I'm sure a lot of the parents on this have heard of the idea of paralysis by analysis, of too many people telling you what to do and trying to slow down and make that decision. And then in a game, you lose a ball. So summing that up, it's a hard environment to love what you're doing when everybody is yelling at you different things from different directions. We need to let players make decisions on their own. Help them, to understand that whatever those decisions are should have a reason. And if they, decisions are not turning out successful too often, then it's going to be up to the coach to try and help the players with those decisions. But at the end of the day, if the parents are just supporting their effort and supporting that love of the game, then the players are going to want to continue coming back, and makes for that environment they want to come back to. So moving on from there, we have this idea of this intrinsic motivation, right? That it's the player's desire to play, that they're not playing because the coach wants them to, they're not playing because their parents want them to. I think all of the things that we said above help the players develop that motivation that's their own. Taking ownership of that development. It goes back to what we said before about players creating their own, putting together their own bags, playing on their own in the backyard, and just encouraging to do that, not, telling them that if they don't do that, they'll be failures. Obviously, we don't want that. But just whatever it is they can do, celebrate it when it happens, encourage them, when it can happen. If they say they're bored, tell them the different things that they can do on their own. But that's really how players' long-term development takes off, when they're doing that, when they're touching the ball and working on those technical repetitions, so that when they come to practice, now they can turn those technical repetitions into skills since they're in the environment of making a decision. Right, so being an ally of the coach and asking questions. I think being an ally of the coach goes back to what we were saying before, not coaching from the sideline, letting the coach help the players. The coach is the person who put together the training session during the week and gave them the different attacking and defending concepts to focus on. So it's really, really important that coaches are coaching and that parents are on the sideline, and like I said before, just encouraging that effort. If things look like they're not right, then feel free to ask a question. Ask respectfully. Usually we talk about giving a coach 24 hours after a game before we start asking questions. Ask the questions with the intent of learning and getting on the same page. Not from the mindset that I already know that this coach is completely wrong, and I need to tell them that. But just to see where they're coming from, understanding someone's point of view is obviously very, very important of that going forward. So I think that's how we get to be an ally of the coach, which is really, really important for everybody moving forward on the same page. Okay, and kind of buzzwords throughout the year: a growth mindset over a fixed mindset. Through 20 years of coaching, I've seen players really take off at 18 years old. I've seen the players who are way ahead of everybody at 8 or 9 come back to the pack. The players who were in the middle of the pack forever all of a sudden take off at 15 years old. And so long as a player believes that their effort is guided in the right direction, and they're excited about overcoming challenges, and they're excited about becoming better, we don't need to tell players that they're great at 8 or 9. We need to tell them how hard they're working and how important that is. So that's really, in essence, the growth mindset over a fixed mindset. Telling somebody how good they are all the time sometimes causes them to worry of what happens when I don't succeed, or people are going to think I'm not good anymore. Where if we're just encouraging the hard work and the process towards improving, and understanding that making a mistake or losing a game or losing a tournament, when turned in the right direction towards how do I get better, what did I plan to do, how do I get better, those are really the most important things. And again, that's part of our long-term player development model, and parents are a huge part of that. So at the very least, here's just two kind of videos that we show a lot in coaching courses. I'm sure none of us do this, but at the very least, we just want you to be the opposite of what's going on in these videos.
So, not your best practice. Can we agree on that? It seemed like you wanted to hang out with your friends more than practice. And that's fine if that's what you want to do. You know, just tell me. Because you can do that anytime. Maybe we can skip your next game. Because choosing to waste your time, that's one thing. But wasting my time and your coach's time? That's selfish. You don't care about other people. You don't care about hard work. You don't care about teamwork. That's why you're always on the bench, every time it matters. Your coaches think you're selfish too. Your hockey coach, your soccer coach, your football coach, everyone does. So, if you want to keep playing, you need to take a good hard look at yourself. And think about that.
Open your eyes! My old woman can referee this game, Ben!
Listen to this muppet. Every week he does this, screaming and shouting at the ref.
Ref! Ref! That's a yellow card, ref! Card him! Yellow card him, ref! How are these kids supposed to learn the game if you don't know the game? He's an animal. Give him a
Look at
yellow
him, the
card.
ref. But he gives up his Saturday mornings to do this. Now, was it the right decision? It might have been, it might not have been. Who knows? We all make mistakes.
You mug!
Would you take this at work? Nah.
Okay, thank you.
No, don't thank me, thank you!
Just clear the
You're a
playing area,
clown.
please.
You ain't got a clue!
All right.
Clown!
You see, Dad's trying to live out his own dreams through his son.
Get it! What's the matter with you? That's a suicidal boy!
Now, how's he supposed to learn
Rosie!
if he can't make his own mistakes?
Referee, you're not watching the game, mate. You're watching me. You ain't gonna see nothing here.
It's no wonder we're losing so many refs when they're having to put up with people like Jet the Biscuit here every week.
Come on, Steve. Hey, you're running about like a chicken with no eggs. Liven it up.
And it's no wonder thousands of kids give up the game either. If we carry on like this, we won't have a game left.
Ref. Ref.
Some of us need to take a long, hard look at ourselves.
Right, so just watching those, again, that kind of approach is just not in line with our idea of long-term development, because in order to get long-term development, you need kids continuing to play, right? So, and that's not only, that action is not only from parents, but from players, from club members. We just all need to keep that player-centric approach, which means they want to continue playing. It is still a game that can help many things in their life moving forward, and we want them to continue playing that. And I think, not being this way is the first step towards being an ally of a coach and helping build that intrinsic love for the game for our players. All right, so just kind of the last few slides here will be pretty quick. The club works very hard to provide, the best financial value for our families and for our players. So one of the things we do there is try and keep our costs at a much lower than some of the other higher level clubs around us. So especially for younger kids who families might have numerous kids playing many different sports, we don't want to price anyone out, especially young kids who want to develop that love for the game at a young age. So it's very, very important for the club to keep those costs low. Right now, our U8 and 9 teams have a substantial subsidy from the club. That kind of keeps the long-term costs for families down as well. So one of the things that we often do in the middle of a pandemic or when fields become an issue, this can be harder also, but offering additional training nights, so players that are really all about soccer and aren't doing other activities can come out and work on foot skills, work on their first touch, work on finishing, at no additional cost. So we want to kind of give supplemental training as well as the team night training. For older kids, we have a college prep and search process, so players understand what college soccer is like, how to prepare for it, how to contact coaches, how to go through the recruiting process. And again, this is at no additional cost, for these players and families. So picking a college is daunting unto itself. When you add a sport in there, it becomes that much more tricky, especially if you've never been through it. So the club has a few different college coaches on staff, as well as other coaches who have helped players go through this. So we've done a very good job of sending kids to Division 1, 2, and 3 programs. Helping them really kind of supplement the cost of their college education, which is obviously invaluable coming out of school with a lot less debt than they might otherwise have. Right. And like we said before, just doing all of this at lower costs. And part of the reason we do this at a lower cost is because we don't have a hierarchical structure of a lot of people at the top being paid for things. It goes back to the early on slides of the volunteers, of this being built on the backs of volunteers. So the costs that clubs and parents incur do go directly into the programs that their players are benefiting from. So just to wrap this all up, first of all, thank you very much for being a part of this club. Thank you very much for taking the time to sit down and watch this. This is something that you can come back to from time to time, and to be quite honest, you can use it to hold us coaches and clubs accountable for what we say we're going to do. We don't pretend to be perfect. We certainly know that we don't expect our players to be perfect, but so long as we're striving for these goals on a regular basis and we keep improving, then we'll all get there together. We want to encourage questions or concerns. Anything about this presentation, specifically about what we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it, feel free to email me at the address you see there. Again, we want a question and answer period with this, and we want to be able to directly address your questions. If there's something specific you have about your son's or daughter's team, again, please respectfully go directly to the coach first. If there's anything going on, I think so long as we're all adults and we're all being respectful of each other's time and purpose and what we want, and we frame it in that way, everyone should be able to talk directly with each other. So again, thank you very much for what you do, and we're looking forward to continue growing the club and helping players really kind of thrive in an environment both on the field and off. We hope to see you on the field soon. Take care.